Oh, there's an echo. Is that, I feel like I'm announcing, like hello? Is this how it should be? It is? Okay, all right. Okay, so, well, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. This informational hearing for the Committee on Early Learning, Juvenile Justice, Public Education, and First Generation Initiatives is now called to order. Today is Thursday, December 15, 2016, and the time is 5:32 p.m. So on our agenda is the Guam Education Board and the status and the revision of the Board Policy 409 relative to the policy enforcement and implementation. And then the second one would be issues pertaining to student safety and achievement. Notices for this informational hearing were disseminated via email to all centers and all main media broadcasting outlets on December 7, 2016 for the 5-day notice, and again December 13, 2016 for the 48-hour notice. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Acting Chairperson Mrs. Tongo, and we have our Acting Superintendent Joe Sanchez. Thank you for coming. We also have Mr. Chris Anderson, who's the Deputy Assessment and Accountability. You know, the titles have switched. And we also have Mr. Gary Gumatauta, who is the legal counsel for the board. And we have Ms. Margaret Cruz, who is EEO and Title IX coordinator. And Sylvia, if you can also come up, since you are the acting of curriculum and instruction, I believe, right? Yes. And I also have with me over here James Servinos, my chief of staff. So let's go ahead and get started. As you know, this informational hearing was scheduled to provide the community and the committee an update on the board policy drafts and the implementation of Guam Education Board and staff. So I believe the board has been working on revising the board policy 409 since July, and it has been in consideration to change the policies even prior to that, as I understand, even before July, that there were already efforts to revise since then, there were two separate policies, one for students and GDOE policies that were discussed during the meetings. And so let's just go ahead and start by asking the basic question about where you are at regarding the revision of the board policy 409. But before that, Ms. Tantogo, I noticed that you're the only board member here. Turn on your right.
Dr. Cruz probably is on his way, because I did remind him about today.
But there was a committee that was actually working on this, a subcommittee. So are you the chairperson of that committee?
No, ma'am, I am not. It is Maria Gutierrez, and we did inform her about this meeting, and you were willing to change the date, but
you haven't. Mrs. Gutierrez was the one who was in charge of revising the policies, and this has been ongoing since July. And so the invitation actually had gone to the board since 3 weeks ago, and I did make a note, and for the record, that I was willing to change the date of this informational hearing to accommodate the board members. But I haven't heard from you, so I assumed that everybody was going to be, and especially for her to be here?
We did, Senator, we did call, we informed everybody. Lou went ahead and sent a message out that we would like all the board members to come. And then I'm pretty sure that Lou spoke to you, that Maria said she was leaving Monday and she would not be here. Then you did say that you're willing to change the date since she is the chair of this committee for her to be present. We went ahead and emailed those people and we have no response from them.
Okay, so this is just to be clear. We have been working on this since July, and the board has not adopted any change to date?
Correct. It was on our agenda for the November meeting, but we did not have a quorum, so we did not have a meeting. So no, Senator, we're going to have a quorum for December. So we're going to.
Are you able to answer questions regarding the revisions?
Well,
given that you're not a member of the committee?
Well,
are you?
Mr. Gary will help us here to go ahead and answer some questions. So, you want me to just go ahead?
Okay, go ahead and give us the opening.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, buenas and Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, commonly referred to as Title IX, is a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs and activities. All public and private elementary and secondary schools, school districts, colleges, and universities receiving any federal fund must comply with Title IX. This, of course, includes Guam. Under Title IX, discrimination on the basis of sex can include sexual harassment or sexual violence, such as rape, sexual assault, sexual battery, and sexual coercion. Over the last few months, we have identified challenges and deficiencies related to how we come into compliance with and address Title IX issues and violations. This is something that we take seriously and are addressing at this time. On behalf of the Guam Education Board, I would like to sincerely thank you for affording us this opportunity to provide you with an update as to our progress. I would like to turn this over to our Acting Superintendent, Joe Sanchez, who will lay out the presentation for today. But also we do have our legal counsel here, our attorney, Mr. Gary Gumatalto, who is prepared to answer any question also on the board policies or to clarify any of the current and the proposed policy 409. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sanchez?
Thank you, Mrs. T. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman Underwood. I would also like to echo our acting chair's remarks and thank you for this opportunity to share with you our progress. Title IX issues and violations are especially troublesome in school systems as they address some of the most sensitive and personal matters as they relate to human beings of any age. Sexual discrimination in all of its forms, but most especially in regards to sexual harassment and sexual assault, cannot be tolerated in a school system or anywhere in a community. Title IX requirements helps schools and districts create an environment where students and staff can feel safe and free from discrimination in all of its forms. It helps to do so by establishing procedural safeguards that protect the rights of both victims and those accused, as well as provides guidelines to help ensure that all in the educational community understand their rights and are able to assert those rights during those unfortunate instances when it becomes necessary to do so. With me today are Mr. Gary Gumatalta, Guam Education Board Legal Counsel, who will be providing an overview of Title IX and an update to Board Policy 409 and the proposed BP 910, which will cover the prevention and intervention against harassment, intimidation, bullying, cyberbullying, sexting, and sexual harassment as it pertains to employees. Our Deputy Superintendents, Christopher Anderson and Sylvia Calvo, are also present. Mr. Anderson, along with our EEO officer, Mrs. Cruz, will provide some additional information on the data that was requested earlier about our historical records of sexual harassment, as well as the training that has taken place to date. Additionally, if there are questions about our current procedures and the extent to which our current procedures are already in compliance, we will be able to address that as well. And lastly, I will be discussing our communications with the U.S. DOE's Office of Civil Rights, the office that is, as you know, is responsible for conducting investigations of Title IX and other civil rights violations, as well as the Equity Assistance Center, the organization identified by U.S. DOE to provide supports to state departments of education in their efforts to provide training and in working towards compliance with civil rights laws and requirements. I would also like to recognize the presence of any other additional DOE employees here with us today. Also, too, I'd like to recognize the presence of our acting vice chair, Dr. Jose Cruz, who's joined us today. Of course, acknowledging Dr. Robert Underwood, the president of the University of Guam. Thank you. Thank you very much. So with this, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Gary Matata.
Good evening, Senator. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to address this issue. My firm was hired pursuant to an RFP, and we came on board with the Board of Education in late July, around July 27th. At that time, there was an investigative request that had already been made to other agencies with regard to Title IX and the then superintendent. So that was handed to me at that point, and they asked me to conduct an investigation. At that time, also, I was told that there was a need to revise Board Policy 409. So on August 17th, I provided the first draft of the revision of my suggested revisions for 409 to the board, and specifically to Maria Gutierrez, who's the chair of the subcommittee that was handling that, along with Peter Atta, who was addressing that, as well as transgender. I was later told that they wanted it done differently. They wanted not a combined policy, but a policy that broke it up between students, an application for the employees. So we shortly thereafter provided exactly that. Then we were told that that wasn't what they wanted. What they wanted was a strikeout version showing the original, and then the strikeout and changes that we made. So we then provided that. Then in November, so as late as November 4th, there had not been any communication with me or my staff about this, except to the extent that Maria Gutierrez called a meeting on that date. At that meeting, she stated that what we provided to the board wasn't what she wanted. What she wanted was to take a version that had been done by Robert Koss before he left, and then build on that and show the strikeout and changes. So shortly after that, we provided that version, and as of this date, we haven't heard anything from her on that. So it just seems to be an administrative issue from the beginning, from as early as August 17th all the way through to today. Now, in the course and conduct of my investigation of Title IX, I immediately found that the issue of application of Title IX, integration of that into the policies and organization, was nil. The school system had paid to send one of its in-house attorneys to the mainland for training, and that was done prior to January of 2015. She went to the States, took the training, came back, and then she offered a small training to just the people in federal contracts. Didn't offer to anybody else, and didn't do anything else to try to implement. Then shortly after that, she left to go to work for the AG, so it was sometime after January of 2015 when the new AG took office that she went to work there, working in child support. Then after that, our records show that Robert Koss was trained for this, but he was never appointed as the Title IX coordinator because there's an inherent conflict with the fact that he represents as the EMRO management on a regular basis at CSC. So for that reason, he was deemed to not be the appropriate person for it, and nothing else was done, although the agency clearly was signing assurances with the federal government for 3 years at that point. Okay, so I went back 3 years and I found the documents where they signed off saying we are in compliance specifically with Title IX. So that assurance is supposed to be for each and every law that the federal government is concerned with, including but not limited to Title IX. So with that being said, then we launched our investigation in the full throttle, got into all that, and the biggest problem we ran into was at every level, there was a lack of information as to what Title IX was, and a lack of information as to what the duties were of the people that worked for DOE with regard to their need to report. So not just the need to report under Title IX, but the mandatory reporting requirements that are local law that say that whenever there's sexual harassment involved or something of that nature, that it's to be reported immediately to the Guam Police Department and other authorities. So there was no compliance on that issue at any time during that I could find in the 3 years that I went back to. In addition to that, we're also mandatory reporting as an organization for anything to do with child abuse or child endangerment. So anytime that we need anything for that, we're supposed to also report it. It doesn't matter whether we believe it's true or not. It doesn't matter whether or not that it's incredible. We're still required to report. It doesn't mean the authorities are going to do anything with it, but we have a duty to report, so we're doing that. And I've worked with Mr. Sanchez on implementing this policy with regard to whether or not they've actually approved the detailed 409 revisions. So he can talk to you about what he's actually done, and I can confirm that a lot of parents as stakeholders have already received written instructions about the Title IX program and the implementation activities that the agency's undertaken already. So I know he's already working with that, but he can give you more specific. So that's where it stands. It's not yet approved. I've got a copy that I can give you of each one of the two that you may want to review or disseminate to your people. And then this is a resource guide in case people need more information about Title IX.
Yeah. So,
That's where it stands.
okay. So it appears that from what you had given us, there were several attempts to revise the policy.
That's
and
correct.
then when it was sent back to the committee, it was rejected, you were given a different set of instructions.
That's correct.
And that seemed to have happened over 3 times, at least 3 times.
That's right.
Since you started
in the building.
Let me ask you about the committee. Aside from Maria Gutierrez, who else were members of this committee?
I'm not certain. All I know is that I'm working with.
Okay.
I sat in
Okay.
not all of these.
Yeah, here's my concern. Of course, we are still required to comply with Title IX, whether it's in our policy or not. So I'm glad that you have taken the steps. It seems like you've taken the steps to implement and to be in compliance with Title IX. But my concern here is that the revision of the policy has just taken so long. This is since July. And you know what occurs is that usually after the policy is adopted locally, then there is the training to implement the policy. So at this point, it appears as if Title IX was not of importance, or the revision of the policy was not a priority to this committee. July, August, September, October, November. We are now December, in the middle of December. And the work had even started prior to this. So we have 6 months of work that should have been completed in no less than 6 weeks. The same thing had occurred, at the University of Guam. They've had to revise their policies, and I'm not citing them because of my personal relationship. But when you make an observation that another institution that was faced with the same situation made a revision, they saw the weaknesses in their policy, and they made the changes immediately. And not only that, but they trained every single student, every single employee. And they made sure that even incoming students were trained. Then that raises the question about how this committee of importance, this committee had really placed on ensuring that a policy was set in place and passed so that our students and our employees are protected. That is what the policy is intended to do. It's supposed to set the procedural safeguards, the safeguards, so that any employee, any student that is threatened, or they feel they are threatened, that they have a means and they have a clear pathway to make a complaint. And this is an issue that really is of concern, really is, and is of concern to the community. So I'm just really disappointed about that. But please, Mr. Sanchez, can you please explain to us what you have already done to be in compliance with Title IX? What the department and the management team has done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm gonna kind of switch the presentation. So I'm gonna kind of present before Chris Anderson's section on the data and discuss kind of our progress and the work that we've been discussing with both OCR as well as the Equity Assistance Center. So I'm glad that you noted earlier that even absent a change in the policy, it didn't preclude us from actually moving forward to come into greater compliance with Title IX. Now, as in August of this year, shortly after July, and then we contacted the Office of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education. As I noted earlier in my opening, this is, of course, the office that would investigate any civil rights violations for entities that receive federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education. So we discussed with the representatives there, and we discussed the issues that we were having on Guam, and they advised us of a couple of things. First, they noted that issues like this are happening throughout the entire country, and the approach that they advise states and districts is that compliance with Title IX is not an either-or type approach. It's not yes, you're compliant, or no, you're not compliant. It's always a move towards greater and greater compliance. So when you look at the first step that they wanted us to take, and this of course was an open back and forth dialogue where they would help craft the type of training that they're going to be providing to us. But it's a review of all of our policies and procedures, almost like a comparison between what are our current procedures versus what Title IX requires. So it's that kind of back and forth to take a look at to what extent are we already compliant, and in those areas, how do we strengthen those areas, and in the areas where there's gaps, how do we take immediate steps to address those gaps, right? So I wanted to open with that because that's been the nature of the conversation with both OCR and our Equity Assistance Center. So since August, we've been again back and forth over the last couple of months, sharing with them our policies and procedures. So what we've done is we sent a set of a lot of our documents. I actually gave a resource binder. It was too much to copy for everybody. But this will give you an example of everything that was provided to OCR and the Equity Assistance Center for their review. Because although we did tell them that we were in the process of revising our policies, they still offered to take a look at our policies and laws to assist us further to see if there's any other gaps that they wanted to kind of help us include. So we sent that to them, and whenever they have questions, they call us. And we did ask for immediate requests for training, but the reason why they didn't recommend immediate training, I think it was August, we requested for training in September or October, they felt it was too soon. Is we needed to continue on with our efforts to revise the policy. They wanted a chance to review the policies. We can actually do our own assessment so that when we come to them, we can tell them here are our gaps, here are our weaknesses, and they would tailor the training to what our needs are. We initially had a December date for training where they would, first we would kind of send the team to come over, get official training from there, but then at some point the offer changed to they can actually send people here and do both the overall training for us as well as individual certification for specific members in the Department of Education so that they in turn can provide a trainer of trainers. So that December date has actually moved back to January. So our intent is to work with them, and they will be sending a team out to Guam. We've identified who will be participating. It's going to be all school administrators, central office division heads, of course, our Title IX coordinator and our EE officers in all the different schools. They would provide base training to them, and then they would provide a select set of training to a smaller group who can then provide additional training throughout the entire district. So throughout this time, when we've been working with the board, we've been doing that review and ensuring that whenever these cases come up during this short time period, that we make an effort to ensure that there's certain components that are added that we didn't have in our current procedures. And I guess if we have any questions, I can maybe ask Mr. Anderson to talk about our current procedures and some of the additional safeguards that were added. Like I'll give you an example. And I think okay, so I think Margaret just stepped out. But I know one of the pieces was the informing of the victim. You know, that's an example. I don't believe that our current policies or our current procedures have a mechanism to do that. But I know since then we've actually provided a step that we would kind of inform the victim as to the progress of what the investigation was, what was the progress of what was happening. So they can kind of speak further to that. But in our kind of review back and forth is that's our approach, is we identify to what extent are we already in compliance and where are the gaps that need to be filled.
So my question is, the information that would be provided to the victim would include their rights?
Yes.
Yes, and so, because I don't believe that was in place before July or August, before this, but you have started.
Yes. So, for example, the personnel office and of course the ones that Mr. Cruz would participate in utilize the Title IX resource guide as our kind of foundation. So absent the official training from the Equity Assistance Center, we, of course, all the staff who were going to be involved in it took it upon ourselves to read the law, read the summaries, go through the guide, and they are now using this as the guidelines for conducting those investigations as well as the interaction that they have with the victims. Now, another example is, like you noted, making sure that they know what their rights are. For everybody who, another step is for everyone who's being interviewed, they need to understand what the allegations are, what the purpose is for the interview, and what their rights are. So if they don't feel, for example, that they want to answer a particular question, they need to be told that you have the right to not answer this. So it's using the guidelines and expectations that are already identified in the resource guide as kind of our basis.
What I have noticed was that from what you had provided to me is that you've had trainings that had occurred. Now, Margaret, did you actually go for a training yet or not yet? Okay, but there had been orientation meetings or what type? Yeah, what type of training has occurred so that the level of awareness among our students, our school leaders and employees as a whole had been raised regarding the Title IX requirements?
In July, we started out with the Principals Academy, put together the training module for sexual harassment, and that was presented as a mandatory training to all administrators. They got a copy of the module so that they can go ahead and conduct the training at their school site. In addition to that, I've also conducted trainings on sexual harassment in accordance with Title IX at the school sites for all employees. So various schools have been trained, including central office staff members. Since August, I've been conducting trainings out of all the different school sites and the divisions. And I'm still continuing being asked to come forward and conduct trainings as well to all the employees.
So have we already trained and provided this training to all the school principals?
Yes.
Okay. How about the teachers and the school aides? Have they all been provided at least an awareness?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Margaret, but that's provided at the school level by the school, or do you do that personally?
The school principals are trained, but they've asked if I could come to the schools and train. So I've done training since August to a total of 2,330 staff at the schools that have been trained since August on the sexual harassment, and over 318 for the central staff. So a total of 2,648 employees have already been trained on sexual harassment since August.
That's great. So we have 4,000 employees.
Like I said, we still have some.
But that is such a good start. I really commend all of you for because it's pretty tough scheduling the training and actually conducting it. It's time consuming. But the fact that as long as all the principals are aware, their level of awareness, and then they themselves could actually, that's just you conducting the training. There were those that were conducted by the principals themselves, correct?
Correct. And again, I had sent them the training formats, including a video for them to present.
Okay.
There are interactions and discussions that break it down so that they can understand it. And so they presented that at the schools.
So, Mr. Superintendent, would you then be able to state that for the most part, every leader in the school system had already been provided training and that there is a level of awareness among all the employees about the procedures that need to be taken?
Yes, absolutely. But for full disclosure, I just want to kind of emphasize that the training that's provided is, we have not been officially trained yet by the Equity Assistance Center. So the training that's provided is based off of Margaret's review and our review of the title requirements, as well as whatever resource packets that were provided to us by yourself, actually, and as well as the Equity Assistance Center and USN. So I won't be able to say that we've been officially trained yet and we don't have any certified trainers yet, but we have made the effort to review what the requirements are
Provide an awareness.
in accordance with the titles.
How about our students? Do our students know what their rights are? There's a standard set of rights that are the student rights that I believe should be posted and is available even through the resource packets. Have our students been made aware of those, even by distributing the letters to them, or?
So I believe that the principals have already started the training with their students and providing the information to them. But at the same time, we're also looking at a mechanism where we can make this training kind of a regular, recurring piece. So as you may know, we're implementing the Lonnie Kate task force curriculum regarding sexual assault and sexual violence in the schools. So what we've done is I've asked the Division of Curriculum and Instruction to take the board policy 409 and kind of, because as you read, it's very technical, it's very lawyerly, right? so what we want to do is make it something that's understandable for students. So thank you to Ms. Calvo, who's our acting deputy for curriculum. They've already designed elementary, middle school, and a high school model or handouts for students, and we're going to be incorporating that into the Lonnie K task force curriculum. So that's K all the way through 12, and in the elementary schools it's kindergarten all the way through 5th grade. In the secondary schools it's during all of our health classes. Now in addition to that, we're going to incorporate a regular yearly training. We don't need to do it for elementary because every elementary student gets it every year in that curriculum. In the secondary schools, although they would get it in their health class, obviously they don't take health every year. So what we want to do is we have the health students take it during the health class, but then there will also be an additional training for all students on a regular basis, on an annual basis, where they would be aware of what the policy is, and when the policy changes, it will be a new policy that they would be aware of. They would be informed of who their Title IX coordinator is, and with that, just to let you know, we're actually in discussion about not having one Title IX coordinator at the school site, but maybe a team of 3, where it's maybe possibly a counselor, a school administrator, and then the EO individual. So it's a combination of probably a team of 3 that we would have trained, and all students would be informed of who those individuals are. They would be informed of what their rights are, as well as the mechanism with which they would have to file a complaint.
I think that's a very good idea because not everyone would be comfortable sometimes with just one person. And so to have a team, you always have somebody else. And I think that's just great. You've really gone above and beyond, really, what would have been expected, given that you don't really have a policy that has been adopted yet. So there must be a schedule. I'm sorry. You probably, I mean, you've done this before, Sylvia, where you would have a schedule of when this training would occur, and not done all at once, but over a period of time. And I believe it's an annual awareness that has to occur.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess what I was going to add is, in our discussions with OCR and the Equity Assistance Center, is they emphasize that compliance, as we noted, is an ongoing continuous process to greater and greater compliance. It's also not just check marking off a box that yes, we provided training, yes, we did this, yes, we did this. Because that kind of creates an environment of, oh, we did it and then we don't have to worry about it. But it's how do we implement the policies and provide the training where we can create the environment where, number one, students and teachers and everybody knows that this type of activity and these types of violations are, number one, not tolerated. Two, when it does happen, the students know and have a mechanism for reporting it.
Yes.
Three, they understand what retaliation is, where they understand that, because a lot of, I think Margaret mentioned it with a lot of our training, that's kind of like the number one question that comes up, is the concern is, well, if I report this, my boss, or especially if it's a student, and I report this, what's going to happen to me if I'm reporting a teacher, what's going to happen, and so on, right? So we really want to create the environment where students and the unfortunate cases, sometimes staff, feel as though they're able to report these violations without any fear of retaliation, and what are the protections around that. So it's really kind of I guess it's, in terms of compliance, it's easy to come into compliance when you want to just check mark off the box, but it's really the creating of a culture of intolerance of this kind of attitude and activities or violations. But when it does happen, is how do we address it, and how do we eventually come to a resolution?
Yes.
The Superintendent's office actually almost every year has a component that discusses, sexual harassment. And one of the things that they showed, at least the board at the time when it was attending under the consolidated, was they have a poster, okay? And the poster actually tells you what are your rights. But I suggested to them that they should actually devote a bulletin board that would be very visible for the student, so that they can see it every time, and they have, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to report it, what really is written there. Interestingly, in this past year, it was kind of like watered down. And I asked the question, where are the posters? Where are they situated? Because it is really, see, anybody who passes can actually see that, and it's a visible manifestation of really what is happening, what should happen, and who is it supposed to be involved. And so that's a poster that we can actually even avail to you. But it was kind of like not, Chris, I don't know what happened, but it was not followed through. And I told them that that to me was very important, because they have the training every year. Federal program, somehow, the consolidated grants always has that as a component. This last time, it was not trained, the trainer was not really from the States, it was just, I guess, somebody who was deputized. And I told them, I said, I really am uncomfortable, because it should really be followed through. And the one that's most uncomfortable for me was that they did not give what we call that public manifestation of a poster, because every corner should really have a devoted bulletin board, so that it becomes almost part of the culture. You're talking about the culture. Well, it becomes a culture that I know where to go, and I may not be comfortable going to the people, but at least I know where I can start going. really go from there. So it's a nice summary, but the issue that I raised was it really has to be made more public and more posted so that students can see it, because I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm going to feel intimidated. Well, it's once it's made public, the students can actually do it, and they can even talk about it themselves. They can talk about it and interact with it, and even interact with their parents. And they say, did you see that, Johnny? And then just go from there. So it's something, Joe, that I think we need to follow up and encourage, because that was a very nice poster, and I think it was paid out of consolidated grant money. But somehow I see that it's petered down, watered down, and not done. And I think I really am very uncomfortable that it was not followed through. It's something that I think we really have to manifest, because it has to be manifested, and not behind closed doors, not in corridors where actually students can be, because give them a chance to interact with it. So that's what I suggested, and I don't know what happened with the posters, but that was nice posters, and I thought it was done well, but it's not posted. It should be posted, because it's a poster.
Any senator, it was posted, but Dr. Cruz. Because we did, I know the federal programs gave out one to every school, but Dr. Cruz wanted a specific area where everybody can see it, because we don't even know where was the sign posted at the school. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz, for that, because it does make it, and that's one of the requirements. It shouldn't just be one. It should be all over, where really. But you reminded me of what Gary had noted earlier, and you mentioned that there actually had been documentation of assurances, and you noted federal programs, documentation of assurances to these consolidated grant applications that were signed. I remember that. I remember signing off on those, and but what I'm getting is that there were those assurances that were signed, but what I'm also hearing from you is that we were not really in compliance. Correct?
Not in full compliance.
You were not in full compliance. So who actually had provided the written assurances in those? Who signed off on those assurances? Was that? So the superintendent signed off. Yeah, I should remember. I did sign off on assurances. Yes, I did. Signed quite a bit. But so if we were not in full compliance, was that then?
That exposed us to a problem.
Excuse me. You need to.
So that exposed DOE to a problem that we could either be fined, or we could, worse, they could just withhold funds. And since we were already on high risk, then the chances of us losing the funding for a year longer was probably higher than it would be, say, in those school districts. And the average fine that I found as I was researching was about $100,000. Still a considerable amount of money, but of course it pales when you think about losing 50 or 60 million. And then in the news recently, you probably saw in Penn State, they got hit with the largest fine ever, 2.4 million, and they're not going to contest it, they're going to pay it. And it's strictly a Title IX violation.
And the reporting is also very important. That was why part of the request for data that I had sent to DOE had to do with the number of complaints that have actually been made and recorded, and then of those complaints, what action had been taken. If I think, Joe, you've already given us pretty much a good idea, so let's move on to that next set of questions that I've actually asked. Over the past 10 years, I have asked for you to provide the data on the number of complaints that had been recorded, student to, whether it's from the students, the complaints were originated from students or from employees. And it's not only the data, how many of those, what action was taken, and how many of those resulted in, if any action by EEOC or had caused the department a settlement with the complainants. So that was basically, if you could prove, you will be.
Let me just have maybe Margaret talk the piece on the number of cases of sexual misconduct and sexual harassment as it pertains to employees, and then I will address the same topic as it pertains to students. You in your packet have this legal size sheet of paper, right? This is the breakdown that Margaret had put together based on the files and data that we have in our office. So Margaret, you want to go ahead and just go through this document?
Okay, I wrote it. Yes, yes. I went back as far as 2004, and yes. Okay, back to 2004, broke it down between sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. So in 2004, we had one sexual harassment case, employee-student relation. However, that resulted in a letter of reprimand.
Talking about employee-student, it was an employee who harassed the student.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And then in 2005, we had a sexual misconduct. An employee was charged for misconduct against a student, and that resulted in a dismissal. The employee was a limited term. Okay. So back down to 2006, it was a sexual harassment. We had 2 cases of an employee that was alleged by students, and then we had 6 under sexual misconduct. 1 resulted in adverse action, and we had 3 letter of clearances, 2 letter of caution, and 2 others were just dismissed. Okay.
Were those 2 cases dismissed, or the employees were dismissed?
The employee was dismissed.
Okay, so there were 2 employees dismissed. Okay.
Okay, in 2007, we had employee 1 for employee student, and these are allegations of employees versus student. And we had 3 for sexual misconduct of employees and students. 1 resulted in adverse action, 1 was issued a letter of reprimand, and 3 were letter of clearances. Okay. When a letter of clearances result, it means that insufficient evidences that were found.
Yes.
In 2008, we had 1 who's employee. We have 2 employee-student. Under sexual misconduct, we have 1 with employee-student. 1 resulted in adverse action, resulting also maybe in a letter of reprimand, and 3 letter of clearances. Okay. And then in 2009, we had 5 cases of employee-student, and then 7 of sexual misconduct, employees, 6 for employee-student, 3 adverse actions, 2 resulted in a dismissal based on a final notice of adverse action, 7 were issued a letter of reprimand, 5 letter of clearances, 2 letter of caution, and 2 that went, that had no action actually taken on that. Okay.
So no action.
Due to insufficient evidences.
Okay, evidence.
And then in 2010, we have 1 on sexual misconduct, 1 resulted in adverse action, and that resulted in a suspension. And in 2011, we have 2 under sexual harassment, employee. We have 2 under sexual misconduct, employee-student. 1 is an adverse action, resulting in a suspension, and then 2 were issued a letter of reprimand, and 1 forwarded to EEOC.
Okay, what was the action taken by EEOC on that?
That was a suspension of the employee.
Okay.
And in 2012, it is an employee-student. There was 3 cases on that. 3 adverse actions, 1 resulted in a suspension, 1 was dismissed, and 1 resigned. Okay. In 2013, we had no charges of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct.
Reported.
Okay. And in 2014, we had 3 employee student, 2 resulted in adverse action, 2 resulted in a dismissal, and 1 was no action.
Dismissal of
Dissolution,
employees.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And then in 2015, we have 1 with employee-employee relation, all right, that resulted in a request to change of supervisor. All right. And in 2016, we had 3 employee-employee issues, and then 1 under student and employee, that's under sexual harassment, resulted in a letter of reprimand, 1 no action, and 1 is pending, and 1 went as far as for EEOC.
Did any of these result in the department having to pay the complainant?
Yes, that resulted in a total of $70,000 that was paid out by the department.
To one of the complainants? And that was from the,
That was a total
directed by
payout.
the EEOC?
That was a total payout.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret, just to clarify, those are 2 cases or one?
2
single-
cases.
Those are 2 cases, not one.
2 cases had to be paid,
Paid out by EEOC. I'm sorry.
I mean, by the
DOE.
department to the complainant. And what, okay, so it was taken to EEOC because the department did not act on the complaint, or because the department didn't agree with?
It went to EEOC because the victim filed a complaint with EEOC.
And
And the result of which what we call a letter of determination based out of EEOC that DOE, the action of the employee taken was a violation, so it resulted in.
But usually the complaint, okay, so clarify for me, can the employee go directly to the EEOC?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
that could have occurred where they went directly to the EEOC
Correct.
and could have happened that way, and then
Yes.
they were awarded.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, so that was a total of $70,000.
That was paid out by the department.
By that department.
As part of the settlement.
That's part, okay. What I had noticed here was that, I just wanted, because, you know, when Dr. Cruz, when we're dealing with data, right, we can see the outliers, and the outlier here is 2009. I think I know who was the superintendent at that time. We had 7, you had like a total of, let's see, 12, I don't know, that was the highest reported, where you had 13, okay, let me see, 13 for sexual misconduct and 5 for sexual harassment. Yes. Right. Yeah, but that was in 2009, then now in 15, 16, we no longer have any complaints. 13. Yeah, no. In 2013?
2013, that was an employee, and that was a significant problem.
Okay, so the reporting can be, you know, the data can give, you know, can indicate that people are feeling free about reporting, but it also indicates that there's a lot of misconduct going on that we need to address. But the lack of, like for example, if in 2013 we don't have anything at all, and then in 2015 only 1, right? We have a school district which we have 4,000 employees and 31,000 students. Yeah. So part of this may very well be that they just were not aware of their rights, right?
Well, I think, and maybe Margaret can talk a little bit more about some of the questions that come up during the training, because I know the trainings are very lively and very interesting, because absent specific cases, I think the main type of question is an employee, or in some cases, probably students asking an example, right? Like they're asking for examples. So this happened and this made me feel this way. Is that sexual harassment? This happened and made me feel this way. Is that sexual harassment? So I think, or at least the trainings that I've been doing when I pop my head in and the training that I actually attended, those types of questions seem to dominate the discussion. Is the employees actually asking for examples? Because in some cases, I know I've overheard some of them say, "Oh wow, so technically, probably at that time, I could have filed something and not know it." So you're absolutely right. Awareness and having an idea of what exactly sexual harassment is definitely a big factor as to whether or not someone actually reported it.
I lost a niece because of bullying in the classroom. You know, she complained to the teacher, and the fellow was actually pulling her hair. And she just, I guess, you know, sometimes when you get into feeling that you really are just incapacitated and you feel as if nothing seems to be happening, then you take it upon yourselves and then you do yourself the harm. And that is that was a very stark experience, because it's a very close relative of mine, and she's a beautiful girl. Okay, beautiful girl. I don't know whether that's what you call the tomorrow way of saying, you know, hey, look at me, you know, look at me now. But it was just, it was continuing, and it really just was, it went all the way up to that one. I know my cousin actually is a spokesperson to talk about that, and asking parents to say, please, you know, listen to your children. Listen to your children, ask your children, and listen to them, because it's very important that they report to you what's happening in the school, because we don't have a camera in every corner of our school, but you know the students themselves, you know, will be on the lookout. I remember when I was in the 6th grade, I was a safety patrol, and I loved it when I hear somebody speak tomorrow. Toka 10 cents. You know, and I just, to me, I was deputized. I was made to feel good. But then, you know, later on, I said, you know, I really was used, and I don't even know where the money went. It was a lesson that I just felt, you know, it's really a very alive issue, you know, to me, because when our students, especially sexual harassment and what have you, when the students kind of take it upon themselves and they really feel as if they're really in a corner and really nothing seems to be happening and it's really not happening, you take it on yourself, and it's a psychological process that some people do, because they just feel so incapacitated and so unresolvable that just says, I guess might as well just do it myself and stop it. And then it stopped. But you know, it's sad.
So definitely, I think that brings to light some of the conversations that we've had with principals and assistant principals about, or even teachers and staff, taking students and even staff concerns seriously. I mean, it's not something that can be brushed off, especially if you're the victim and you feel harassed. We need to continue to create a culture where we take that seriously. I know in some cases, you know, we've had situations where the individual who they're reporting it to would kind of probably imply, like, you know, hey, you know, don't worry about it, get over it, you know, something. But you know, that's something that just can't happen. It's not acceptable, because it's really from the perspective of the victim or the person who's being harassed. And sometimes it's just, you know, in some cases, mediation is that kind of like one option, because sometimes the harasser doesn't know that person's feeling that, you know, so our administrators, you know, kind of know that sometimes in those situations they have to inform the students and say, hey, you guys need to talk this out. So it's really both taking it very seriously when someone says they feel harassed or bullied or whatever, and kind of trying to have them work through that feeling, because you share a very unfortunate circumstance, but I think we know that all too often that can happen.
I think what we're really talking about is that we want to create a safe environment, safe for individuals to feel safe enough and be ashamed to say, your joke, what you think is a joke is really offensive. Because and sometimes I've heard this before, to say, this is just cultural. I have heard that before. This is just cultural. But when it doesn't make you feel comfortable, then you have to call it and say, that is offensive to me. But it takes a lot of courage to do that. It does. And I think that this is why it's real important that when we're talking about, what you said, Joe, about creating and evolving, that you're working towards, a target where people and the students especially feel comfortable enough to call it and say, I don't feel comfortable with your joke. I don't feel comfortable with the way you look at me. Because that's part of it, the way people stare at you, and that's in the policy. It could, for some, they may think that we're just admiring, but if it makes the other person uncomfortable, then it can be defined as harassment by that victim, by that person who's receiving that. Going back to the statistics, and so you have, this was provided, and Chris, did you have students that?
Yeah, so tables 4 through 6 in your packet is basically looking at sexual assault, sexual harassment, cyberbullying / sexting, and specifically looking at the issue of sexting over a 10-year period. So if you want to just take a look at table 4. And I apologize for the small font for the visually impaired like myself. We were really trying to keep it on one sheet of paper, so I apologize for that. Right, so again, you'll see over a 10-year period, we did a cross-tabulation looking at a specific incidents and controlling for the different actions that school administrators have taken. Mind you, this information that you're seeing is, of course, adjudicated data. So these are school principals who actually had a case, they did they provided the student the due process, found the student guilty of an offense, and then took an appropriate action. This, of course, would not capture any cases of sexting or assault or harassment that did not get reported or dealt with by an administrator. So if you take a look at the top row where it says sexual assault total incidents, if you look across the years, those are the total number of incidents that you'll see. And then you have a grand total of 499 incidents of sexual assault that were reported by school administrators across the district over that 10-year period. Actually, it's 10 and a half, because we are showing you 16 and 17, which is a half year. I'll just skip to the bottom of FAST where it says sexual assault total actions. Then you'll see the total number of actions that administrators took to address those cases of, in this particular table, it's sexual assault.
So, okay, I see that. And again, I am, along with the fact that starting school year 2012-13 and all the way to 2016-17, there seems to have been a significant drop in the number of incidences because our students are actually getting it now and they're not assaulting each other. Is this?
I'd like to attribute it to the amount of effort that the schools have placed in ensuring that students, faculty, and staff are aware of their responsibilities to ensure that students are aware. And if you look at, I believe we provided a copy of our standard operating procedure 1200-022, but it's basically the operating procedure that's required by Board Policy 409. And when you look at the procedures, I'll just want to reference one in particular, number 2. It says each school will be responsible for teaching behavior expectations, definitions, and consequences for bullying, cyberbullying, sexting, and sexual harassment to their students in their respective school communities. That, along with the reporting requirements, and I know Mr. Sanchez made reference to the fact that adults can't just blow off or not take seriously comments that students make. And I believe the policy and the operating procedure do provide very good guidance to the schools to ensure that they're not taking those things lightly.
That's great.
And so from what's happening at the classroom level to what's happening at the administrative level, because again, at the central office level, the Student Support Service Division does have a responsibility to provide guidance to school administrators on the board policy and the standard operating procedure. And then principals have to then go back to their schools and ensure that their faculty and staff and students are also aware. And so there's, again, guidance in terms of ensuring that language is included in student handbooks, faculty handbooks. So I think there are different layers where the department is really trying to provide a lot of support, and I think it is reflected in the data as you noted.
I think, and I congratulate the department, because I do know that even those years from 08 to 2011, there had been, we were just starting to be aware and make everyone aware of the sexual misconduct, the cyberbullying, and then there was actually a task force that was then formulated, right? That was supposed to address bullying and to really, and so this is now the result, the greater awareness, the training of teachers, students, and staff. I think this is really indicative of the success of that.
And not because you're the chair of this committee, but I do want to give you credit, because it was under your leadership actually that formed. A lot of the structure. Well, it was that FBLG Outgator public execution. I know, but I do want to, yeah. That's important, because it was I think a milestone in the department that we really needed to really get tight on our protocols of how we're handling things, and so explicitly, and from the operationally defining specific incidents of behavior, being very clear about the progressive steps of what administrators need to do to address behavior, to standardizing the office discipline referral process of how schools do business across all 41 schools. That was basically because of that experience, and of course your leadership to push all of us to try and tighten up our protocols.
Okay, good job.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's see, where are we?
And just to note, the other two tables are, again, just looking at sexting and then looking at sexual harassment. Same breakdown of information.
School, their hormones just come and go, and they don't even know that it's coming. And I think that's something that we have not even addressed. You talk about social studies, you talk about health. Why aren't we opening it so that we can? Because that's what those hormones are alive, and if we don't know how to kind of direct them appropriately, it's going to play havoc. And I as a rehabilitation counselor trained myself, I say, there are people have got to be sensitive of the feelings of people, and at the same time, never mind the feelings, because the hormones are kind of they just come and go. And when it comes, it plays havoc. When it goes, we have peace. But somehow it just comes and goes, and until you find some sort of relief, then it just stays with you. And we really have to kind of even up to this age, I still have to say, look, not to be very any form of gesture, but when there's a pretty girl coming around, I always make sure that my wife's not around. Because sometimes I just move my eyes and say that take care of that. But it really is. That's a very human, and this Title IX just brings out really that this is really this is the reason why Adam and Eve really got into trouble. Thank you.
Okay. Joe, did you have anything else to share? And
Well, I think well, not in closing, of course, I will open the floor for any additional questions, but I think I want to thank the work definitely of the staff and a lot of the discussions that have been going on over the past couple of months. You know, it's a tough topic, as Dr. Cruz noted. It's also a kind of an awkward topic sometimes, but there are a lot of things that are kind of happening that really is helping people just kind of to get over them. And I do want to point to, again, some of the work that we're doing with the Lana K Task Force and the curriculum that is being implemented, because even at that training, when we talk with teachers, you know, we do know that sexual education in the classroom is very important, but a lot of times the nature of that education, even though it's in the curriculum, the nature of that discussion is really dependent upon whether or not the teacher is comfortable with talking about it.
right.
But with the Lana K Task Force, as the AG noted, it's in law. It's required by law. The curriculum is adopted by law. And what you have in the curriculum tells you what you need to talk about. So it makes it very explicit. So now that we've provided that training to the teachers who are implementing it, and it's age appropriate. And that's what's very powerful about it, is you start introducing these concepts as early as kindergarten, you know, where you're talking about your body and good touch, bad touch. It's a very powerful thing because it provides consistent guidance throughout the entire district about how we would approach sexuality, sexual education, and, you know, unfortunately the cases of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So thank you, Dr. Cruz, for bringing to light the awkwardness that we sometimes feel as teachers and as family members, as parents, as colleagues. But, you know, I will point to that curriculum too as a major step for Guam, a major step for the department, in that these types of discussions are mandated to happen, and which means they will happen throughout the course of the years.
You know, what I have gotten from this, from all the information that you have provided us, is that first of all, the management team has really worked very hard to ensure that steps have been taken to raise the level of awareness regarding what is appropriate and not appropriate, and what the rights are of students and employees. So you've worked very hard despite the fact that the policy has yet to be revised and to be implemented. That's still a point that I'm very disappointed about. Because 6 months of revising a policy, especially since there has already been policies that have been developed. We are not a unique educational institution or organization. This has been done elsewhere. If we wanted to get this done, this would have been done, completed. Then it would have sent a very strong statement to our students and employees about the importance of preventing sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and protecting our students and our employees. Not only from each other, but all the way to the management team and even to the superintendent. So, Madam Chair, of course, here we are, I'm lame duck, but I know that whoever will have the Committee on Education will share the same concern about the sense of urgency and how the policy itself and the state of the policy, where it hasn't even been adopted to this point. And when you tried to put it on the agenda, you couldn't even get the quorum together. That just speaks volumes, unfortunately, to our community about the lack of concern about these matters. I am confident that with the work that all of you are doing at the management level, with the operations and the standard operating procedures, that somehow that what seemed to be the lack of importance by the committee, placing the revision and completing the revision will be somehow mitigated by the work that you've already done and your ongoing work in spite of the fact that the policy hasn't been adopted. But this is something that will be passed on to the next committee, and I certainly hope that we can make that statement. I think that you've learned from this acting superintendent that when you sign the assurances, that you can really say that those assurances we do have, we are protecting our students and we're complying with all the Title IX provisions and EO provisions. So with that, I just want to thank you for providing the community of Guam. This is not just reporting to me, it's reporting to the community about where the department is relative to protecting our students and implementing or complying with Title IX and other policies that ensures that they are in a safe learning environment. And it's pretty tough. It's been a tough year, but the progress that you've made is really exceptional. I think, Chris, the data that you are collecting is just very important, and I'm glad that you were able to pull it together because we can see the patterns and we can see where really we have seen the difference in the number of incidents that have occurred and where it hasn't been reported, and that points then, I'm sure you analyze, you don't just collect it, but you analyze and say, oh my goodness, maybe there's something up. And you also have this at the school level, so you would know exactly which schools you may need to work with, right, as a result of this. So was there anything else? I just want to thank all of you. I thank you, Madam Chair, for really cooperating and working with me as a committee chair. It's the same thing with you, Superintendent. It's really been really good to know that progress has been made, and I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing for our students and our employees. So thank you very much. And so Sejus Maasi again for participating on this informational hearing. There being no additional questions or testimony, this informational hearing is now concluded. The committee will continue to accept testimony until 5 p.m. Friday, December 30. Testimonies may be submitted to the Guam Legislature via email at centerunderwood@guamlegislature.org or via fax at 671-969-0975. The information hearing is now adjourned, and the time is 6:50. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.